Wendy, thank you very much, and delighted to be here today for this very important conference and very important opening session about the scale of the ambition required now to fulfill the kind of potential that has been mapped out by so many players in government, in business, in civil society here in Scotland. And it is a great privilege for me to be here today in order to give the Saltire Prize lecture. I've been on the Saltire Prize Challenge Committee from the start, and it's been a very rewarding experience. It's allowed me to see exactly how one needs to build towards future commercial success of the kind of scale that is now hoped for the marine technologies here in Scotland. Scotland, of course, has its own energy efficiency action plan, 12% reduction in energy consumption, total energy consumption by 2020. I'm about to say some good and encouraging things about what happens here in Scotland. I'm not altogether sure that that is an appropriate ambition level for total energy efficiency. Secondly, that geopolitical context I just mapped out in front of you makes the case for renewables, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Thirdly, some people believe that that geopolitical case I've just shown you makes the case for nuclear power. Now, it is actually extraordinarily difficult at the moment to explain to you the utter absurdity of what is going on in Whitehall at the moment. Ever since the 2008 White Paper, there has been a configuration of private sector interests, senior civil servants, and other forces behind the scenes who have succeeded in bringing nuclear back to the top of the pile as a supply-side option for a low-carbon, energy-secure future for the UK. I find this completely unbelievable. Having thought that we really had put this industry to its death on a couple of occasions in the past, it is now extraordinary to see it risen from the grave once again and taking up a huge share of politicians' energy and commitment about low-carbon futures. Now, I don't want to dwell on this because I feel here in Edinburgh that I'm in the sane and the nuclear-free in Scotland. But you can't not dwell on it if you're as passionate about renewables as all of you will be. From my perspective, thinking about the Saltire Prize, it is, for instance, a little bit extraordinary to talk about the UK becoming and remaining the world leader on marine technologies and seeing how small a net investment is going to be available from the UK government to make that happen. The £20 million from the Low Carbon Innovation Pot is a start, significantly enhanced, of course, by £18 million from Scotland's own commercialisation fund for marine technologies, and strengthened now by what I think is a very important recent announcement in February, £50 million over 5 years for this new catapult centre in Glasgow, bringing together NARIC, the Carbon Trust, and, of course, Ocean Energy. Now, if you net it all up, and there are a few other sources of money, as we know, particularly the EU's new entrance reserve, this is still a questionable sum of money available to create that leadership role. And without that leadership role, as we know, as we saw with the UK's interest in wind power before, all of this can easily just slip away into utterly banal mediocrity of the kind that the UK-based wind industry saw for many years. So let me come back to the huge potential for Scotland in terms of the case being made for renewables. Again, just think about that geopolitical context which I mapped out for you. Route Map 2020, which obviously now is the document that we can all refer to in this regard, is a hugely encouraging and significant strategy for Scotland. It's part, of course, of the overall energy strategy for Scotland, part of the overall economic strategy for Scotland. But in itself, it speaks to an ambition level that I think is very appropriate. Renewable output equivalent to 100% of electricity consumption in Scotland. So far as I can tell, there doesn't seem to be another EU country that has made that kind of threshold of ambition level for itself. And combine that, of course, with a commitment to 30% of total energy coming from renewables by 2020, a reasonably ambitious heat target coming from renewables, and a slightly more modest target on renewable transport fuels. Altogether, it's impressive and reinforced by a target for 500 megawatts from community energy, which I'll come back to in a moment. Now, the document in itself is enormously significant. It does create a sense of purpose and ambition that is appropriate to what's hoped for here in Scotland. But two things I want to comment on in particular. The unapologetic, very strong line taken throughout the document, and indeed in the opening comments that you've heard today, about the importance of jobs, skills, and prosperity. It seems to me that one of the reasons why we're still in a bit of a mess when it comes to public perception about renewables is that that case has not been very intelligently made, certainly not in England. Indeed, I despair of the utter ineptitude of Whitehall politicians in their phenomenal mishandling of the public debate about the value of renewables and indeed energy efficiency, particularly in the built environment. So my first point is that this route map has to make the case about jobs, skills, real people employed in real value-adding jobs, permanent jobs over time. And secondly, as I think is done really well in the route map, it has to emphasize the importance of community energy. As I said, a target for 500 megawatts may not sound hugely ambitious, but actually in comparison to what else is going on in the UK, this is really significant. And the fact that we now have something like 800 community groups involved in Scotland in one way or another in community-based schemes coordinated by Community Energy Scotland is fascinating. Just to bring me up to date, they very helpfully sent me the latest copy of Community Energy News. And to me, this is just so refreshing. Such an exciting sense of what is going on in Scotland that is absolutely not going on in England, sadly. Why not? Well, there are many different reasons for that. But one of them, I'm sorry to say, is the somewhat brutish behavior of some of the large wind developers in England who have ridden roughshod over community concerns, shown very little interest in those concerns at the pre-planning and planning stage, gone through utterly formulaic consultation processes, been dismissive of efforts made to involve communities and indeed to gain share with communities to ensure that communities actually receive a proper financial return for this asset being created in their midst. Now, I think those rather brutish developers are changing their ways, but it's too bloody late. One of the reasons why the Daily Mail is on the rampage is because they've been able to work with that underbelly of disaffected communities in England who have seen that their interests have counted for naught as they have gone after their own energy wind farm development schemes. We're paying a heavy price for that. Public opinion is not in a good place when it comes to renewables in general. For those of us who see wind power as being absolutely critical, indeed preconditional, on achieving a genuinely sustainable energy future for humankind, to witness the quality of the debate we've got today is deeply hurtful. So we all have to learn that lesson. We have to understand the implications of what happens if you continue to take communities and consumers for granted in the pursuit of a more renewable energy future. Now, I don't think that's happening in Scotland. I know, as we heard from Ian and indeed from Jeremy, that we have to improve the ways in which the industry reaches out in Scotland to communities and continues to bring them in to this sense of an unfolding, purposeful, renewable future for Scotland. But it is true that even more needs to be done on that than has been done up until now. The third reason and last reason why I think the route map is important is because it makes it very clear this isn't just about the individual technologies. This is about a different way of seeing the future of this country. Yes, it flags all sorts of barriers to bringing forward those proposals and specific developments to achieve those very ambitious targets. A lot of them are to do not with the technologies themselves, but with the enablement of those technologies to bring that level of ultra-low carbon electrons into the system. And obviously we'll hear a little bit more about the national grid aspect of that in a moment. There are significant barriers. We know that the costs of many of these technologies have still got to be driven down, particularly offshore wind, tidal stream, and wave power. But for me, what's going on here is best explained at a very different level. It's all about creating the conditions that investors need, that citizens need, that politicians need. Because we have to, of course, remember that politicians come and go in a democracy. And we have to bed this in such a way that it is proof against change of government. We have to build that kind of confidence. We have to build the sense of doability. There will still be some who say the equivalent of 100% of electricity consumption in Scotland coming through renewable output, you must be joking. There'll still be some. There'll still be some who will listen to Jeremy's figure about 31% coming from renewables already, demonstrating how much you're on target here in Scotland. We have to be able to take on those naysayers and confront them with the reality of what these investments look like. This is the most extraordinary transition. We have to transition out of an industrial civilization based almost entirely on the use of stored solar energy in the form of fossil fuels, coal, oil, and gas. We have to transition away from that to a world based almost entirely on incoming real-time solar energy, not the stored stuff, the real-time stuff. And we've maybe got 20, 30 years to effect that transition. It is a startling prospect that we have to undertake. But to share that with people, to enable people to get a sense of the ambition level associated with that is essentially what this conference is all about. And of course, to celebrate the role that Scotland's industry will play in that incredible transition process. Thank you very much.